The clang of iron and the smell of chalk filled the Naval Station Norfolk gym at dawn. Most came here to test their strength, but Elena Torres came to disappear, just another quiet logistics tech blending into the racks and mirrors. No one knew she carried secrets forged in the most brutal training the Navy could offer. So when 4 cocky recruits decided to challenge her, mocking her silence and daring her to prove she belonged, they had no idea they were about to ignite a lesson that would spread across the base like wildfire. Elena Torres liked the weight room at 0530, when the air smelled like rubber mats and machine oil, and there were only a few stray silhouettes in the mirrors. The overhead lights clicked on in staggered rows, tiles of brightness advancing like a slow tide across barbells and racks. She tied her hair into a compact knot and wrapped the same faded lifting straps she'd used on deployments where gyms were plywood boxes and plates rattled in the wind. Her orders said she was a logistics tech, clipboards inventory, forklift licenses, and everyone treated her as such. That suited her. She knew the number of cameras mounted at the corners of the gym, the blind spots between them, the fastest path to the nearest aid kit, and how to contour her breath so that nothing about her looked like a threat. The weights didn't care who you were. They moved for physics and discipline, and Elena respected both. By 0600, the gym began to fill. Cadences from the running track outside leaked in through the open bay doors, syncopated with the clank of iron and the whir of rowing machines. In the mirror, Elena saw a reflection of herself that was easy to underestimate: 5'6" compact sinew wrapped in standard-issue blue sleeves, neat face, calm. She worked through a sequence that looked more like maintenance than ego goblet squats, with a kettlebell single-leg RDLs for balance pull-ups with a quiet exhale on each rep and a farmer's carry that never wobbled. She logged each set in her head, the way she logged floor plans times faces. Around her 4 recruits clustered in a loose island near the squat racks, loud with the kind of confidence that grows in the absence of experience. They were new to Norfolk and already mapping out their hierarchy in chalk and bravado. "Yo, look at logistics over there," one said, not trying to lower his voice. He was tall and lantern-jawed, a Midwestern poster child, and the others orbited around him, carrying groceries for PT. Another snickered. "That's the lightweight circuit my aunt does." Elena chalked her hands and kept her focus. She'd heard variations of the joke in every gym on 3 continents. Ignore the bait. She moved to the bar and slid on bumper plates, modest, unthreatening numbers. The tall one, Dane Dave, checked his watch and announced louder. "Max Day, boys." He loaded a bar to something reckless for a morning spine, made a show of cinching a belt, and drove himself beneath the knurling like a movie montage. The bar wobbled, his knees smiled inward, and his friends shouted and pounded the rack uprights until he trembled, the weight up and racked it flushed and triumphant. Elena counted his breath recoveries and returned to her sets deliberately, not watching. She finished her final carry, wiped the handles, and slid plates back into order because the room was better when equipment returned home. "Hey," Dane said, appearing at her elbow as if summoned by her quiet. "You finished with the rack, I am," Elena said, already stepping aside. He leaned one hand on the upright and tipped his chin, the friendly tone sharpening. "You know there's a real barbell over there. You don't have to play with kettlebells all morning." "Kettlebells build grip, hips, and patience," Elena said. "They don't lie." His friends migrated closer, drawn to the gravity of a scene. The smallest wore wraparound sunglasses indoors. Another shook out his arms like he was about to sprint. "Come on," Sunglasses said. "Let's give logistics a real workout. 1 set real weight. Prove you're not hiding in supply." Elena's eyes moved. Not her head exits the way a trainer was watching near the whiteboard, the distance to a water station. This was not a fight. It was a morning. "You don't need me to prove anything about what you can lift," she said. "You have your numbers. Be proud of them." "Be proud," Dane laughed, "of schoolbook warm-ups and half plates. Nah, be proud is making weight cry." "You're new here," Elena said, calm as a sunrise. Ask around. The only thing that cries in this room is cartilage when you stack it too high." The friends exchanged looks, that pretense of offended masculinity that was really a request for escalation. You dodging sunglasses asked, or scared you'll get shown up. "Tell you what loser does the sled push course with the weight we pick." Or Elena said we could all just do our programming and not damage our spines out of insecurity. The smallest, the loudest smirked as if he'd been handed a script. "I think you're ducking us logistics." "Torres," she said. "Elena Torres." Torres, Dane echoed like a referee calling a player forward. "One set. Deadlift. We set the bar. You either lift it or walk." Elena exhaled through her nose and examined the barbell as if it were a clock. She was thinking mostly about cover, the way she'd carefully let people misread her for months, the way her superiors had praised her for a perfect gray profile. She could demolish his numbers without a sound and invite every rumor monger within a mile. Or she could do nothing and let the four of them grow into the kind of sailors who believed loudness made them right. Neither choice felt like leadership. "One set," she said finally, "but we set a rule. We keep it clean. No straps, no hitching. And this ends after." Dane grinned. "Sweet." They began to slide plates. Elena watched how they counted what they grabbed first. He loaded to a weight that he had no business touching for a single at that hour, chalked sloppily and yanked. The bar scraped his shins. His back rounded like a question mark, and he fought it to lock out with a hitch that didn't count anywhere except his friends' phones. They applauded anyway because the real performance wasn't the weight. It was the face he made atop it. "Your turn," he said, stepping back after he'd unracked to a number safely above hers. Elena approached the bar, set her feet with a small adjustment. You'd miss if you blinked, and wrapped her hands around the knurling like she was greeting an old friend. She drew in air and made a cylinder of herself from diaphragm to glutes. When she pulled, the bar rose as if guided on rails smooth as a door on oiled hinges, and she set it down with a kiss to the platform. She could have added 40 pounds. She didn't. "That's it," Sunglasses crowed. "That's your big show." "That's a clean single," Elena said. "Good mornings at your spine are not." Again, Dane said, heat rising in his neck. "Or sled course." "You said one set," Elena replied. "We keep our word." Laughter from a nearby bench crew angled toward them. The room had that animal hum that precedes something dumb. Ooze phones raised the tilt of bodies toward spectacle. Elena wished for an NCO with a thunderclap voice. Instead, she had herself. "Walk away," she said to them low enough that only the four heard. "You've got nothing to prove to me." It should have ended there. Endless mornings could have swallowed the moment. But the smallest stepped in front of her when she turned to put her plates back. "You're not going anywhere, Torres," he said, and reached for her wrist with an open palm, that lazy grappler's grab that starts as a joke and ends as something else. Elena didn't decide. The decision had been made years ago in a pool in Coronado and in a windowless room where instructors taught the difference between combat and brawling. She pivoted quarter turn, not more catching his wrist and drawing his elbow across her core so his shoulder suddenly belonged to physics instead of pride. He found himself on his toes, mouth open. Elena rotated his hand as if unlocking a stubborn hatch, directed him politely toward the mat, and set him down with the gentle finality of a librarian shelving a book. Her eyes never left the other three. Dane lunged like a linebacker, arms wide for a clinch. Elena slid inside the hug, found a hip, and sent him over it. He hit with the breathy grunt of someone whose diaphragm forgot its job. The third came from her blind side. She'd already mapped that line. She hooked an ankle behind his and blocked his knee with her shin torqued, and gravity did what gravity does. The fourth had the clarity to stop with both hands raised, an apology forming like mist. The room went from raucous to vacuum still. Somewhere a plate rolled in a slow circle, the coin spin sound thin as a whistle. Elena breathed once, twice. She stepped back. "We're done," she said. "Everyone breathe. Everyone make good choices. No one needs to be embarrassed more than they already are." The trainer near the whiteboard had moved halfway across the floor, his face a chessboard of concern and respect. "You good, Torres?" he asked, voice pitched to Carrie, but not in flame. "I'm good," she said. She looked at the recruits and found no glee in their faces, only the glossy look of men who had collided with a boundary they didn't know existed. "You..." Dane sat up slowly, one arm curled around his ribs like something precious he'd forgotten how to hold. What he began and stopped before a sentence could make him smaller. The trainer made a phone call without leaving the floor. Within minutes, a chief with 12 stripes of salt at his temples was in the doorway. He didn't shout. He had a commanding presence that bent the room toward rules. He separated the clusters with 2 gestures and collected statements. There were phones. Yes, there are always phones, and there were witnesses who today wanted to be the kind of sailors they'd wish they'd been. Elena gave her account in a thin version of the truth provocation warning, a brief series of defensive controls the end. The chief listened with that silence that says he's been paid to detect missing pieces for decades. "Torres," he said when the floor settled and the recruits limped toward the water fountains, humbled. "My office. Now." She knew the route, the turns that took you from iron and chalk to linoleum and framed commendations. The office smelled like coffee and furniture polish and the slow heartbreak of paperwork. He closed the door behind them and didn't sit. "What you did on that floor wasn't anything I've seen taught in basic combatives," he said. "Wasn't even the fancy version we do for officers who want bruises to show off. What you did was clean-tuned and built under stress." "Who taught you?" Elena looked at the anchor paperweight on his desk instead of his eyes. She'd been waiting for this corridor since the second wrist turned under her fingers. "Chief," she said softly, "I need to make a call." He studied her for a beat, sighed and slid his desk phone toward her. He stepped outside and let the door rest mostly shut, the universal sign for privacy in a building with none. Elena dialed a number that routed faster than the digits implied. She gave her call sign and a 4-word summary. The reply was a pause, then a clearance folded into a warning. "You may reveal team qualifications to the senior enlisted present. Mission cover remains for now. Use discretion. Expect adjustments." The chief came back in and lowered himself to his chair like a man who has harbored suspicions and is about to watch them become facts. Elena told him enough. She didn't say SEAL first. She said selection and follow-on and assignment undercover. He didn't blink so much as refine his focus. When she said the word finally, he only nodded as if a schedule had been met. "Hell," he said softly, not unkindly. "I've been in 22 years, and I've never seen the Navy make up a logistics story that didn't smell like logistics. Congratulations on keeping it tight this long." "I didn't come here to demonstrate anything," Elena said. "It was a quiet morning. I wanted it to stay that way." "Quiet mornings are allergic to egos," he said. "I'll keep your cover as intact as I can, but you know how base gossip works. You'll be a rumor with legs by lunch." She did know. She also knew what rumors did to operational windows and how many months of relational groundwork could evaporate in one video. The chief picked up a pen, drew a rectangle on legal pad, his idea of a plan, and started assigning boxes to people who knew how to shut down a brush fire. Public affairs would be looped because you couldn't bury everything anymore, not with thumb-sized cameras attached to everyone's hands. He said he'd handle the recruits, and she believed him. He said he'd talk to the gym staff about device use in training spaces, and she nodded because that barn door had never truly had a hinge. By midday, the story was ash and embers in every corridor. Elena kept to places where she had lines of sight and where the badge readers made predictable music. She walked to the dock and watched gulls knife the air around ships whose shadows were shaped like doctrine. She tried to put the morning on a shelf. On the periphery, she heard the sound a bass makes when it's learning something about itself. The gallows humor, the bravado retold in past tense. The quiet, embarrassed laughter of people realizing they'd been in the room with something like excellence and missed it because excellence doesn't advertise. The call from higher came just before 1500. The voice wasn't the one from the morning. It was older thread in the same tapestry, someone who said her last name as if he'd once sanded it from a list. "You good I'm intact," Elena said. "We'll adjust. You'll stay on station till Friday, no changes today to day, but your cover is now tissue paper. After Friday, you'll get a fresh wrapper. Expect public affairs to request your presence at exactly one carefully stage-managed thing, then a blanket of silence." "Understood. Understood." And Torres' the voice added softer, as if they were at the edge of something personal. "Good decision on force. Clean work. You fed them a lesson without giving the lawyers a meal." "Thank you, sir," she said. "Because there are compliments you accept only to keep moving." Word reached her that the recruits had done 3 laps of the sled course. No phones then. An hour in a small room with an instructor who didn't bother to shout. They would be fine. They would be better if they were built to be. Elena hoped for the kind of apologies that teach the mouth humility. She didn't require them to feel whole. At evening chow, she sat where she always sat, with her back to a wall that allowed an angle on the doors. Conversations bent around her like current around a piling. A petty officer she barely knew slid a bottle of electrolyte drink onto the table without a word and kept walking. A trainer nodded to her from the line respect communicated in the lift of a tray. The chief paused at her table on his way out, put 2 knuckles on the metal like a signature and said, "We'll talk tomorrow. You did fine." Elena slept in the habit she'd learned when the world was louder than Norfolk boots by the bedshirt folded once breath aligned with the metronome of the AC. She woke before her alarm, her mind running the morning again in a slowed, soundless film. The turn of a wrist, the soft sound of a body landing where it wouldn't break the look in a young man's eyes when a myth about himself evacuated his chest. She didn't gloat about that. She remembered who had once pulled her off a mat and said quietly, "Choose to be the reason people get better, not the reason they get bitter." At 05:30, she returned to the gym. The lights woke one by one. She wrapped her straps and chalked her hands. Across the room, the recruits arrived in a subdued cluster, eyes rimmed with the fatigue of a night spent renegotiating their identities. Dane approached with a glass of water and the awkward earnestness of someone trying to pick the right words from a card that didn't come with his uniform. "Torres," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "We were wrong." His voice found the simplest path through the thicket. "I was wrong. I'm sorry. Won't happen again." "Accepted," Elena said. She would have accepted less. She was grateful for more. Sunglasses had left his sunglasses at home. He swallowed. "Will you—" he began, then reset. "What should we be doing?" "Whatever your programming says," she answered. "But pay attention to form. And to people. If you train your eyes to see correctly, your body follows." They drifted back toward their rack quieter, and Elena returned to hers. She set her hands on the pull-up bar, found the groove of her scapulae, and lifted. On the second set, she realized the gym felt different. Not safer exactly. Not hostile either. Maybe more accurate. Mirrors can lie or tell the truth. That morning, at least, they were honest. The work of building a base, any base in steel or character, wasn't done by the loudest mover of weight. It was done by the consistent tolerances of 1,000 small decisions. Rack your plates, breathe through. Keep your hands open until you need them closed, and never confuse quiet for weakness. By the end of the hour, her log, the one in her head, held neat columns of completed sets, and the more useful metric number of times she opted not to escalate. She showered, dressed, and walked into the day that would carry her a little closer to Friday, to a new wrapper, to a mission altered but not erased. Outside, gulls keened and a carrier horn announced itself to the river. The base was awake, properly awake, and the lines painted on the asphalt were as straight as the ones she drew for herself. She would keep them. She would hold. And somewhere down the hall a young sailor would think twice before mistaking silence for surrender. And a second thought could be the difference between a bruise and a better kind of strength. That she decided was a good exchange for a quiet morning.